On to our rants and raves, and this week we're going to start with Dan Kennedy.
I have a rave for the Poynter Institute, which on its poynter.org site today ran some of the best front pages in the country about the death of Aretha Franklin. There was some terrific front pages in there. Both of the Detroit papers where Aretha Franklin lived had wonderful fronts. The Boston Herald had a very good front. And there's a little bit of a rant within this rave, and that is Aretha Franklin is one of the great artists of the last 75 years. And although there's been a fair amount of coverage about her death, I think there should have been more. And I was at least glad to see these front pages and to see the way that Poynter gathered them together.
So would you have liked to have seen, say, the level of coverage that we got when Prince died, for example, or Michael Jackson?
Well, at least the level of Prince or Michael Jackson. We're talking about Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, John Lennon, Elvis. That's the level of talent that we're talking about here, and her influence on music.
All right, our next ranter or raver is Joanna.
So I have a rave for the Globe and Mail newspaper of Canada. And, you know, at a time when newspapers are looking for lots of new revenue streams, they believe they have found one in cannabis. Boston Globe also, where marijuana is now legal, is
it's
starting...
legal at the Globe. Well, kudos to John and Linda Henry for their broad-mindedness.
Apologies. In a state where marijuana is legal, they're hiring a cannabis reporter and editor. The Globe and Mail is going farther than that. They are hiring 5 cannabis reporters, and they are also starting a pretty expensive $999 a year subscription newsletter about the cannabis industry. $1,000 to learn about the exciting and interesting cannabis industry. It is proof, perhaps, that the fact that the newspaper industry is going to pot is not a bad thing.
The hope is that you'll forget that you paid the $1,000.
It's $9.99.
And you're suddenly very hungry.
It comes with Doritos.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's under $1,000.
It seems to me like we are at a point now, certainly here in Massachusetts, where if they could handle it, I know everyone is short-staffed, but every news outlet could use a dedicated cannabis reporter, right? Why not? All right, next up, Lylah.
So I don't usually have raves for traditional women's magazines. I'm just not really their target audience. But Glamour magazine, which is out in newsstands now, has a great piece. It's a great way of looking at the anniversary of Charlottesville. By looking at the people behind the preservation of monuments and the dissemination of the pro-Confederacy message. It's not who you think. It's not, at least they're not the people you see on the news.
It's not Jason Kessler.
It's not, believe it or not. It's a group of unassuming-looking, grandmotherly women who believe that they are fighting not just to preserve their heritage, which they say, but also to allow a place for widows and children to mourn. I'm pretty sure none of the people who have statues erected to them have widows and children who are still living who visit, but they have extended family that do. But it was just a really interesting way of marking an anniversary without going the outrage route. So I thought that was pretty fascinating.
All right, and finally, Dan Lothian.
Yeah, I'm going to rant for Wolf Blitzer of CNN. My wife and I went out and saw...
It's like a standing rant.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yes, there are many things you can rant about. But I was watching the latest installment on Mission Impossible. And there was Wolf. He has been in other movies, but this was a little different, where he not only was playing himself in a TV screen, but he pops out from behind, and I won't give away the whole thing, but he pops out from behind the set, and he rips off a mask, a face. He was acting. And I think networks have been sort of loosening their standards on this. They feel that if you can get your people out there, show kind of the fun, human side, that appeals to an audience. But in a time like this, where people are looking to the media, looking at journalists and saying, you know, fake this and fake that, I was waiting to see a meme of this and some fake note, you know, sent around. Maybe it is. I couldn't find it. But I think this is a time for us to really examine how we've been conducting ourselves, and maybe pull back from some of those things. We need to. It's not that we can't have fun, but this is a serious time for journalists, and I think we need to treat it that way.
I have a very brief rant, finally, for Jack Dorsey of Twitter. I've complained about Mark Zuckerberg before in pointed terms. Jack Dorsey recently announced that Twitter was going to suspend Alex Jones and InfoWars for 7 days. He referred to it as a timeout, a chance for Alex Jones to reassess and then change his behavior, which I think is an absurd notion. It ignores his past body of work. And Jack Dorsey said that Twitter may experiment with injecting viewpoints you don't want to hear into your Twitter feed just to help us all get out of our echo chambers, which is not what I want from Twitter. If I want viewpoints that I don't necessarily agree with and I seek them out, I'll do it myself. They don't need to do that for me. So I think Twitter, Jack Dorsey may be just as overmatched as Mark Zuckerberg. Is that you laugh like it's an absurd? I mean, he's got the cool beard and everything,
right?
But except he runs a smaller and less successful company.
Right. No, I think, look, they all had these great ideas many years ago, and now all of a sudden it's grown into something that they could not have envisioned. And now, how do they deal with it?
They never knew the fate of Western democracy was going to.
And I don't want Alex Jones popping up by surprise in my feed.
That's the last one.
I think it's an acknowledgement of the fact that Jack realizes that Alex has brought a lot of users to his platform.
I think that's exactly right.